Well, hello, a very good evening to you, and welcome back to Tuesday Night Live. I've had the last 3 weeks off, just in case you hadn't noticed, and had some annual leave and time with the family, and very relaxing all up. Was really good. So I'm feeling refreshed and reinvigorated and looking forward to getting back into ministry at Bayside Church, which of course includes now Tuesday Night Live, pretty well every Tuesday night, except during the school holidays. I want to welcome you who are watching this during the week, as well as anybody new engaging with Tuesday Night Live. If you're watching live, you can just, whatever you pop into the thread, either on Facebook or on YouTube, will come through to me here in the StreamYard studio. You can put in comments and questions as we go. So this next hour is highly interactive. And through the week, of course, you can also put comments on the thread. And anytime, if you've got questions and comments during the week, just flick me a message, connect at baysidechurch.com.au, or you can send me a direct message on Facebook Messenger anytime. So the email address again is connect@baysidechurch.com.au. I've got a special guest on tonight, and that's my Jewish friend Tal Spinrad. I'm going to introduce him in person in just a moment. I notice a few comments are coming through. Nika says, good evening and welcome back. Thank you so much. Luke's excited. Woo. And Russell, who says, good evening, Rob. And good evening to you too. My cough, by the way, that dreadful cough, the last Tuesday Night Live, which I got about halfway through, and then about 8:30, I said, I've got to go to bed. I'm so sorry about this. So the cough is nearly gone, but I tell you what, it really has lingered. So which has been a bit annoying. Rihanna, God bless you. Nice to see you too. Thank you for joining us. I'm sure other people will pop in as the evening progresses. So right now, I want to introduce a very dear friend of mine who we don't catch up in person very much, but we catch up on Zoom fairly regularly. And I've got to say, I always enjoy our interactions together. Tal is Jewish and by faith as well as ethnicity. And we end up having great conversations, particularly about the scriptures that Jews and Christians share in common. And so with that in mind, let me welcome Tal Spinrad to the screen. God bless you and good evening.
Good evening. I just want to tell you one thing. I just was, maybe I'm just because I'm becoming old hat at this, as it were, that I noticed the lead in and the clips without verbal dialogue, the clips of you. You're just so animated that but half of them, I mean, you're so passionate, but you're like this passionate fisherman, because it's like, it was this big, the fish was this big, and they tried to get away, and it's just really, it's very refreshing. It's very nice. It makes me feel.
Thank you.
It makes me feel like in a very Jewy environment, because
Wow.
talking with our hands and stuff like that.
That's right. I reckon if someone tied my hands behind my back, I wouldn't be able to say anything. I think maybe I'm part Jewish and part Italian. You know what I mean? That kind of thing going on.
Keep it a Mediterranean.
Well, I certainly do. I mean, I hail from the Northern Hemisphere, so maybe that's part of it. One day I'll do that. You can do the ancestry.com DNA or blood sample, I think, can't you? And they tell you that you're X% this and, all that kind of stuff. So I should do that one day. I'm probably part Viking as well, being from that part of the world. Anyway, Tal, we've got lots of questions, and there's no pressure on getting through all of these questions. We'll just see how we go, and I want to have you on at least once a term. So you've been on once this year already, and so this first question, by the way, kind of continues on from our last discussion. And if you missed that discussion, by the way, you'll find it. It's episode 65 of Digging Deeper. So you can listen to the whole discussion between myself and Tal on Digging Deeper, episode 65. So this question, can you explain more about your answer from last time about why Jesus is not considered to be the Messiah? What is it about his character that is thought to disqualify him with many Jews? I mean, I know there are Messianic Jews who believe that Jesus is the Jewish Messiah, but in your opinion, why is Jesus not considered the Messiah? What is it about him that disqualifies him in your mind?
Well, first you used the magic word, which was opinion.
Yeah.
You know, that it's first of all, let's dispel any, because there was a not negative implication in the follow-up question, but a, how should I say, a almost hurt feeling.
Yeah. So what is it about his character
About
that
his
would
character.
disqualify him? Yeah.
Character. Nothing about his character.
Right.
But I know a ton of decent, very righteous people. Well, maybe a half ton, but I mean, nevertheless, and we all have our off days. It's not within the whole Christian concept of Messiah is not anywhere in the Jewish reality. That to have someone that is simultaneously human and deity, someone that is offspring, not derived from God, from the spark, the sacred spark, or something like that. Not having someone that fixes everything, as it were. If you believe in Jesus, then redemption is possible. Or none of those concepts are Judaic concepts. So let's put it this way: we're not necessarily we. There's that pronoun, we. Me and someone else, we. As Jews are not dismissing Jesus, the individual, as a redeemer. What we are is that we do not believe in the Christian concept of Messiah.
Okay.
So it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't matter what Jesus did. It wouldn't matter. It wouldn't matter. It's not, our tradition has a different concept, a different playing out of what a Mashiach is.
So in a nutshell, what would that be?
In a nutshell, it is we as a people, and when I say people, I don't mean Jews, I mean all humans.
Right.
Work together to create a culture in our existence, right, on Earth, that makes it possible that it's within spitting range of having world peace and world cooperation. All right. So we get as close as we possibly can to healing the cosmic, the interpersonal, the intimate rifts that we have between us and the planet, us and each other, us in terms of individuals, us in terms of nations. And at that point, there is a human, totally human leader who is able to be a facilitator. That person's not bringing an age. That person is facilitated, being a coordinator, admin.
So on a local level, that is
Yeah.
much more doable, isn't it? So you and I, each of us have agency to be able to seek peace in our daily relationships with friends,
Right.
family, those we come in contact with, other drivers on the road, and so on. When you look at the global picture, of course, we're not doing well. We're not doing great at all, because there's so much pain and suffering and war and
but
all of that.
there's the there's the saying that think globally, act locally. So
Yeah.
you do what you can, and in essence, one of the theological differences between Judaism and Christianity is that we don't put really a whole lot of stock in faith. That we creed is not the thing. It's deed. It's what you do. So in other words, if you're an atheist and you don't believe in God whatsoever, although mind you, the atheists and the Orthodox in any religion have incredible common ground because they're both obsessed with God. Different directions,
Yes.
but they're
So
both
true.
obsessed with God.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
fact is that we believe that if you act in a righteous way, no matter what you believe in, you are bringing us closer to where the world is healed.
Yeah.
And it's we don't necessarily, we're not waiting for Mashiach. We're not wait. There are sects that
Yes.
that give voice to that, but
Yep.
even they are not waiting. The key in Judaism is to act in order to heal the world. That's
Sure.
what the concept of mitzvah is, which is loosely translated into commandment, but it more means just how do you walk through this life.
Yeah.
And if
Beautiful.
you walk through this, that everything is we have responsibility for our actions. That's both individually and communally.
Yeah.
So I mean, to come back to the original question, because I mean, it is, and mind you, it's a great and timeless question that I'm in a second going to turn it on you.
Okay.
All right, in a good way, in a good loving way. That basically the question is what about Jesus have you rejected?
Me personally.
And the fact is that we don't. It does not fit into our scheme, and we do not agree with the concept. But the Judaic, the Hebraic vision of this is, in fact, I said in our very first, I was on one of your television podcasts with a very wonderful, in fact, I think her name was Sarah, Muslim woman.
Yes.
And we were doing it. And I was putting, it doesn't matter to us whether, and I'm not associating Jesus with a refrigerator, but it doesn't matter to us who or what you worship, how you worship, what form your spirituality takes. If it makes you a more compassionate person and be able to live with your fellow human beings and everything within creation with more harmony, we are all for it. So we are not, there is a significant difference between rejecting someone and saying it's okay for you, but we follow a different path. And I think that is at the reason why it's a great question and it's phrased in a great, honest, and very courageous way by your community member is that it gets the real seed about how we can disagree with each other about scaffolding, but we can still be on the same wavelength in terms of what buildings we're building.
Yeah. I like one of the things that you said a moment ago, which really resonates, is the difference between deed and creed. And I think sometimes we Christians get very hung up on creed. It's all about what you believe, and if you believe right and you tick all the belief boxes, you can then belong. When I look at the person of Jesus in the Gospels, for example, I see him putting deed out front. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
one of his most extensive teachings that's recorded for us in the Gospel of Matthew is known as the Sermon on the Mount. And there's nothing to believe in there. It's all about how we live. It's all
Mm-hmm.
about how we act. It's all about how we bring heaven to earth or hell to earth.
Right.
As you read those three chapters, Matthew chapters 5, 6, and 7, that's what it's all about. I'm just conscious of time, Tal, and I don't want us to get bogged down on just one question, because there's so many things that I'd like to touch on. So this one, and look, really, you could make this a yes/no question, but can a woman be a rabbi?
Yes.
Okay. That surprises me, because I always had it in my head that you had to be a man to be a rabbi. So just fatten your answer out just a little bit there, just out of interest.
You see, you know, there's a fisherman thing, you know, you lure me in with saying, here's an opportunity that you're not going to have to be long-winded, Tal. And then you go, well, that's it.
By the way, yes.
All right. Ultra, Orthodox, Orthodox. Orthodox, Orthodox. You have to be a man to be a rabbi, but you could be a rebbetzin, which is the counterpart. All right. And it's a little bit, for all you Americans out there, it's a little bit Jim Crow. You know, it's like separate but equal, but not really.
Right. Sure.
However, the further you, like, if you have, I can't, you have you know, the ultra Orthodox, which you can't, you need to be a man. But the minute you get out of that, there's conservative and reform and progress. There's a lot of women, a lot. There is a significant number of women rabbis, and there's a significant number of women leaders of lay congregations. So there is nothing that says, other than this is the way that it's always been, that says you have to be a man to be a rabbi.
Interesting. Yeah, there's nothing in the scriptures that I can think of that would prohibit a woman from teaching and preaching. There's a couple of verses in the New Testament, when you wrench them out of their context, and the reformed and conservative parts of Christianity will do that. They'll wrench these verses out of context and then say, there you go, the Bible says that a woman can't speak, preach, teach, etc., or have authority over a man. But we've dealt with that in another episode of digging deeper. Just taking a break.
Let's put it to rest that along with what we're learning about, you know, the fluidity of gender and identity and all that type of thing, that our roles within the community, the question is, can we have enough confidence in our tradition to be able to be fluid and accept change? Because change can be very good, and an expanse of viewpoints always enriches a tradition.
Yeah. And you need to be humble to embrace change as well. You need to be able to say, you know what? I don't know everything. Maybe what I've always thought or believed was incorrect in some ways. There are always new things that we can learn and embrace. And I think that our faith and our relationship with God has always got to be meandering, growing, developing, deepening. All of those adjectives and a whole lot more should describe life with a living God.
It's a verb. It's not a noun. It's a verb. And
you are correct.
It's ever changing. And what people, especially people who are ultra Orthodox or very conservative, what they don't understand is the more you feel that things have to be the way they are, is that you're trivializing it. You're lacking, dare I say it, the faith that your tradition and the way that people are thinking can possibly withstand the discomfort of change. And change should have an element of discomfort, but that doesn't mean it's wrong.
Absolutely. In fact, I think there should be that level of discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, if what we expect when we visit a church, when we're part of a church community or a synagogue, is to
Uh-huh.
hear a message that simply confirms everything I already know, what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not hearing something that makes me go, wow, I've never thought about that before, or I'm not sure if I agree with that, but I'm going to go and dig deeper and do a little bit more study on that. If we're not hearing stuff like that, what's the point? And I know Christians who they'll leave a church to go to another church because they disagree with something that they've heard or seen at one congregation, and they just want to find a place where everything they already know and believe is talked about and addressed, so that then is very little challenge. And I don't think there's any growth in that environment either. What's the point?
The great Rabbi Heschel, used to say that the defining characteristic of humans that allows us to even approach the sacred is the element that we're able to be surprised. And surprise is a non-value judgment, because you can be surprised in a very negative way as well, and it can be a
Yeah.
very uncomfortable thing. But it's something, everyone deserves a place that they can be succored, and they can feel safe, and things that are expected, and they're cuddled and stuff like that. But not 100% of the time. If that was the case, we would have never left the womb.
True.
Basically.
Yeah. Or attempted to climb back up as soon as we were born.
Yeah.
Hey, let's get on to the next question.
Sure.
And this is from Kirsten. She said, I'm reading 1 Samuel at the moment, and in chapter 15, the Lord says twice that he regrets appointing Saul king. So I'll read these verses, Tal, because
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important that we get the context of the story. So this is 1 Samuel 15, verses 10, 11, and 35. Then the
Mm-hmm.
word of the Lord came to Samuel, I regret that I have made Saul king, because he has turned away from me and has not carried out my instructions. Samuel was angry, and he cried out to the Lord all that night. And verse 35, and the Lord regretted that he had made Saul king over Israel. So Kirsten says, my curiosity lies in the concept of the Lord having regrets when he knows the beginning from the end. I'd love to hear your understanding in this pondering. God plus regret equals puzzled and curious. Your thoughts?
Should I be answering someone who's binging Doctor Who? Uh, spoilers. Listen, there's a whole myriad of arguments back and forth about who. First of all, Samuel is not part of the Torah. All right, they're all part of the Tanakh. It's the Bible.
Yes.
But it's not the first 5 books.
It's all
right?
part of Scripture.
But there's level upon level upon level about who wrote what and who, and all this type of stuff. It's always been my feeling that sacred text is God inspired, and even in certain parts God created, but witnessed and written down by human beings.
You would have no argument from me on anything you have just said. Please continue.
Right. So is the issue for your community member the fact that God is regretting something,
Yes.
which implies that God is not infallible? Because if you regret
Just explain that a little bit. Yeah.
If you regret something, you have done something that didn't turn out right.
Yes.
So God appointed Saul, right? and it did, according to this narrative, it did not turn out right. So God made a mistake.
Possibly, and I
That
guess that's the
I mean
inference.
that
Yes.
that's the literal the consequences. If I appoint someone to something, and I say, you're going to run that Bunnings. I'm appointing you and manager Bunnings, and the Bunnings goes bust. All right, I made a mistake of trusting that person.
Yep.
To run it. So the fundamental discomfort is that we have to make a choice here. We either have to make a choice that there is a human element in the text, in terms of articulating the text, or that God actually is actually feels that they made a mistake.
Yeah.
So, and that's a big deal, because God's God, right?
Yeah.
But also God, if we have free will, God has to be able to withdraw, and there's got to be an element of on the level that we are cognitive of sequence and time being linear. Now, time does not in reality, time does not have to be linear. So, because God could be up outside of time,
yeah,
and see it through, right, and see to the end and the end product. But that doesn't mean that while God is witnessing that moment in the timeline, that God could not feel regret. The bigger question is why? Why would God feel regret? It's I mean, first of all, this is a loaded question for me, because I'm a big King Saul fan.
Okay.
All right? Because God, the king did go to other sources to try to help his people, but according to my interpretation, that's after God had turned his back.
Yeah.
On him. So Saul is one of these guys that his duty of care, and I think that in terms of the narrative, if you play it out, this gets bared out. His duty of care is not to God. His duty of care is to people who are below him, that he is a steward of, that he's supposed to take care of. And that's an interesting, concept. I mean, do we, if we are ordered, like, if we believe that Abraham was ordered to sacrifice his son, right, by God, to offer up his son, I don't think it's a good thing, a good deal as character that Abraham might have gone through with that.
Oh, absolutely. But just back on Saul, so we don't get too sidetracked here. The Lord regretted. I'm wondering, and this is as I'm reading and pondering on these verses personally, I'm wondering is that God gives all of us opportunity, and sometimes we do well with the opportunities that we're given, but other times we don't. Now, God knew full well when he gave Rob Buckingham the calling to pastoral ministry, for example, and led me to plant a church 31 years ago, that I would do lots of things well, and but I would also make some significant mistakes through that time. And I know that comes as a shock, right? But yep, plenty of mistakes during that time. And I'm wondering if that word regret there, rather than, oh, gee, I wish I'd never called Rob to be a pastor and asked him to pioneer a church. God knew full well all the things I would do well, all the mistakes I would make, and everything in between. But there's a measure of, I really wish Rob hadn't acted in that way. I wonder if that's what regret could mean there. So he called Saul to be king. But then there was, Saul made some massive errors, and
Mm-hmm.
and that regret is, I really wish Saul hadn't done that.
Then don't make human beings the way they are. I mean, that's my answer. My answer is that I don't think regret. I think regret. If that's, I will go and do some studying and stuff at
Okay.
later. But regret sounds like an editorial comment. Regret, and this is where someone used that word as opposed to saddened, or
Right.
as opposed to, you know what, he messed up, but the reason why he messed up makes me love him more. I mean, it's there are times that, this as a parent. There are times that you have to allow your kids to make the mistakes for themselves. And as long as those mistakes are not made with preemptive mean spiritedness,
Mm.
and their heart is in the right place, people just have to go through stuff. They just have to go through stuff. So my question is that I would question the word regret. That if you change that into saddened, or if you change that into uh, any number of different things, it completely changes the flavor of the
Mm.
passage.
Yeah. Okay, I like that. We'll park that there, and maybe you and I both do a little bit of digging on that word regret and see what we come up with.
Yeah, the exact translation. Yeah.
That sounds good. We'll take a short break and be back with more of digging deeper in just a moment. All right, so that's for the podcast, not for the live
Okay.
folks. I've got lots of comments coming through here. Good evening to you, Joy. Good day, Wayne. God bless you, mate. Good to see you too. Hello to Alan, who says he's looking forward to this. I'm glad to hear that. Hello, Carolyn. Good day, Mark. Lorraine says, sorry I'm late. Got caught on the phone, but it's good to be back. Looking forward to tonight's session. Georgia Grace at Buckingham, my eldest, who just turned 25 the other day, keen for this Rob Dog and Tal. That's what Georgia Grace's friends and Paris's friends all call me, Rob Dog. Can you believe that?
Yes, I can, as a matter of fact.
Right, Rob Dog. And apparently we're a deadly combo. So I think that
I like the deadly combo. I especially like the First Nations slang reference to it.
right. Beautiful. So I told her earlier, because she said, are you doing Tuesday Night Live? And she said, yes, I am. And then I said, my guest is Tal. And she said, oh, I'll listen. So, so
You know
I've
what?
chosen.
It's nice. Let me tell you, Rob. It's nice to have at least one teenager listen to me.
Well, she's not a teenager anymore. She's
Oh, well, yeah.
25. But anyway, but
He's
yes, it is
graduate.
nice. I just
Yeah,
say, got to tell you, Tal, the majority of people who listen to the Digging Deeper podcast are young adults. Ages 18 to 35 are the number one audience of that podcast. So that's good, huh?
It's excellent. It's excellent, and unfortunately, it's way too rare.
Yeah. Yeah. So no, I'm happy with that. Good day to Carrie. Brian Patterson, God bless you, mate. He's saying it's an interesting discussion. Glad to hear that. Alice has joined us tonight, as has Katie. Such good food for thought, says Katie. I think I am becoming more comfortable sitting with my unanswered questions. Same. It's good, isn't it?
Do you ever, if you're in the middle of a good book, do you ever really want it to end?
No. Great statement.
So answers are great, but the final answer is, it's maybe that's not so good, because that means that the journey is over.
Yeah, true. That's wonderful. I love that. And Madison is 20. So we do have younger people listening to us, Tal, which is great. Mark says, it's been a while since I've joined these. Interesting stuff. Thanks for that, Mark. And thank you, everyone, for your comments coming through. Greatly Greatly appreciated. Just before I get back to you, Tal, with my next question, I just want to give a bit of a plug to this weekend at Bayside Church. This Sunday, in our in-person service as well as online, both of those at 10 o'clock. I'm going to do a couple of sermons this Sunday and the following Sunday called Page, Person, Place. And I want to talk about the interaction of the words of Scripture with us as people, the distance between the page and the person, between the head and the heart, and between the person and a place. How does the word in us then interact with other people and the environment around us? I kind of consider these amongst the two most important messages I've ever taught in my 35 years as a pastor and a preacher. So I'm really looking forward to this Sunday and the following Sunday as I get to unpack that with you. Tal, next question. This is still in 1 Samuel, the book of 1 Samuel. This time it's chapter 16. And I'll read these verses again so that we can get the understanding of the story. Now, the Spirit of the Lord had departed from Saul, and an evil spirit from the Lord tormented him. Saul's attendants said to him, "See, an evil spirit from God is tormenting you. Let our Lord command his servants here to search for someone who can play the lyre. He will play when the evil spirit from God comes on you, and you will feel better." Whenever the spirit from God came on Saul, David would take up his lyre and play. Then relief would come to Saul. He would feel better, and the evil spirit would leave him. The question is this: how did a perfectly good God give somebody an evil spirit? Tal?
I'm sorry. Well, first off, the first impression is that who spin doctors wrote, interpreted that. Because keep in mind that when we get to the Nevi'im, right, the prophets, that there is a whole lot of political intrigue. It does not bow down to any Shakespearean political intrigue at all. It is just as spicy and just as violent and just as everything else. And this is clearly, something that this passage is something that people who are supporters of David would clearly agree with, right? Because Saul has fallen from grace, as it were, and the only one that can help him out is David, right? With his, magical music and stuff. How can a God we claim to be good and loving be the origin of anything that is other? Well, if we say that God is good, then we are already contradicting our concept of the deity.
Do you want to explain that a little bit further?
Because it's limiting. It's limiting. If we believe that we have a creation, right, that incorporates a wide range of stuff, everything between absolute good to absolute evil, it's all within creation. Mind you, the concept of good and evil is in creation, but it is exclusively the realm of human beings. There is nothing else in creation that you can describe as good or evil other than humans. I mean, a whale that eats a baby seal is not being evil. It's being how they were created, right? It is it's doing what they do. All right.
Yeah.
So if we're going to have freedom, free will, then we have to have the free will to do evil or do, the tree of good and evil, the knowledge of good and evil, right? From Eden and stuff. That has to come from God. If we believe that God is the source of all being in the universe, by definition, there isn't so in Judaism, there's no such thing as God created everything that's good and Satan created everything that's evil. That simply is not a concept. It's again, if you believe in that and it points you in a direction that makes you more compassionate and stuff like that, then fantastic. But both you and I, Rob, know that is a slippery slope, because what happens is if you disagree with someone and you consider them evil, they are people of Satan, while you have God on your side.
Yeah.
As opposed to both picking from the same tree. And if you're picking from the same tree, then we have common roots and there's common ground and stuff like that. But if you can put that barrier up there, specifically the original question is how do we resolve or reconcile that God is the origin of an evil urge or something like that?
Yeah. It's interesting actually, because I checked out the Hebrew. As little as I don't know Hebrew, but Bible Hub is a wonderful resource.
Yeah.
And it talks there about the divine spirit producing a frenzied state of agitation that was calmed in some way by music, which I think is a wonderful truth, because we all experience certain types of music. It might be different to you than it is for me, but certain types of music calm our mind. So I was feeling a little agitated today, for example, about a couple of things. I picked up Trinity, our youngest daughter, and I was listening to Christian worship music in the car. And normally I'll let her pick her music. And I said, no, I'm just listening to this. And she said, why? And I said, because I'm finding it calming and I'm finding it helpful. And so I reflected on that with regard to David's experience here with Saul. So whenever David would play his music, Saul's agitation was calmed.
Let me go to the regret comment again. Okay.
Okay. Yep.
What if we change calmed into pacified?
Yep.
Pacified him. That's a completely different thing. So, because keep in mind that David is trying to overthrow Saul.
Yes.
Right? He's trying to take over. It's the new order, right? He's trying to take over. And the king is not happy about that, and he's agitated. All right? And well, he should be. The point is that there are times to be agitated, and there are times not to be agitated. And that's a very tricky dance, because that's the dance that we have with oppressive governments, or in any relationship that might or might not be abusive. That there's a time that being agitated is the correct response, and we have to look at the motive behind someone who is trying to either calm or pacify us. Because calming us means that we want you. Calming means that we want you to be able to be healthy. Pacify means we want you to subdue what is creating a agitation inside of you. Now, a good everyday example of that is when I was teaching early childhood education. And kids would have to, at times kids would have separation anxiety, right? And they'd be agitated and they'd cry and stuff like that. And the majority of adults around them were trying to get, don't be sad, don't be this, don't be that, right? And they were trying to pacify the kid. And the reason is that they were uncomfortable with the agitation that the child was going through. It had nothing to do with what was good for the kid. All right? And what that teaches is that being agitated, being angry, being anything that we perceive as a negative emotion gets suppressed. Because the community is saying it's not okay. In a lot of religious communities, the correlation to that is that you're upset. Let's find all the things you should be grateful for.
Oh, yes.
All right. Now,
Yeah.
now that's just making the person feel guilty about being upset. Maybe their spouse has just died, or they've been wrong. They should be upset.
Yep.
It's a human natural thing. The idea is to sit with the person. The calming thing is to allow them in a safe way to process through it and then allow them to do it. Now, the question is, from how you read, it's back to what we were saying about our relationship with the text. How we perceive David playing music to the king and making him not agitated, we bring our own baggage. Is David looking out for the king, or is David just trying to pacify him so he can roll over and become king?
That's fascinating, because when you consider that mini story in the larger story, that's exactly what was happening.
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, if I knew there was someone sitting in front of me and they wanted my job, for example, then you would have to pacify me, right?
Judaically speaking, I'm going to shock your listeners, okay? The story is much more deeper and much more intimate than that, because Saul takes David in, all right? He is welcomed within his family. And David has sexual relationships with all of Saul's kids, men and women, boys and girls. All right? Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with any individual of that relationship. But it's the fact that he's sleeping around and he's showing the kids such disrespect in that way, because he is he's like a cult leader. He's an incredible, charismatic, beautiful, poet, singer. He's like Jim Morrison of the Doors, right? He's an unbelievable, iconic figure, right? And he's making power plays with the kids of the king in order to destabilize the king's reign. And that's why he's agitated. I mean, it's bad enough that David wants to take his crown, but he's messing around with his kids.
Wow.
And so don't worry about it. Let me play you a song.
Yeah. No, see, I mean, that's a fascinating context to that story. And I think any one of us as parents would be pretty agitated if somebody was doing that, to our kids.
And then I want if any of you folks married out there, right, and your spouse gets really rightfully agitated, not that Christy would ever get agitated here, but get agitated very rightfully, and you came back and you said, just calm down.
Oh,
that would go over really well with an Irish woman.
Yeah, I mean, you just don't say that. I wouldn't say that to anyone. That's actually a bit of a joke in our family when someone gets uptight and says, well, just calm down, or snap out of it, or cheer yourself up, or something like that, which are all stupid things that people say.
Anyway,
Yeah, that's right. Let me play. All right, that's really, really interesting. I think we've got time for one more, Tal. We've got about
excellent.
just about, say, 8 minutes.
Okay.
Selena asks, I was reading the story of when God wrestles with Jacob and Jacob wins and gets a blessing, but God has to dislocate Jacob's hip joint for some reason. It's found in Genesis 32. And so once again, I'm going to read this story. So Jacob was left alone and a man wrestled with him till daybreak. When the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. Then the man said, let me go, for it is daybreak, like, some sort of vampire that couldn't stand the sunlight. But Jacob replied, I will not let you go unless you bless me. The man asked him, what is your name? Jacob, he answered. Then the man said, your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome. Jacob said, please tell me your name. And he replied, why do you ask my name? Then he blessed him there. So Jacob called the place Peniel, or Peniel, saying, it is because I saw God face to face and yet my life was spared. And so Selena continues, in the English translation, it just seems like a strange event that hasn't been explained very well. I was wondering what the Hebrew teaching on this strange but meaningful event is.
All right. I'm going to tell you a secret, and I'm going to tell you the truth. It's a strange event that is open to limitless interpretations. The fact is that the bigger, I'll come back to it in a second. Okay, I know it's like now 6.5 minutes. If you are going to read text, give up on the idea that there's going to be a definitive answer. All right? The beauty in it is that the text is a jumping off point where you can argue back and forth, and there could be multiple realities. It's kind of like an original multiverse type of situation. The fact is, you do not really know who he's wrestling with. We suppose that it's in a dream state, which means that all physical laws do not pertain. Okay? He could be wrestling. Remember, he is at the banks of a river. On the other side of the river is Esau, who he has been estranged with. And the last time they were together, Esau was going to say he was going to kill him.
Yeah.
All right. So this is like his moment of reckoning, right? And in the middle of the night, this happens. We do not know. It's another dream state. All right. So it could be he's wrestling with himself because of his conscience. So my advice is go and pursue that path for a little bit. He could be wrestling with a malach, with an angel. Go and pursue that. Say how he could be wrestling with God. He could be wrestling with a specter of Esau. Right? He could be wrestling with anyone. All right? When they finish and he's asking for the blessing, the traditional way, if you're going to have a new page in your life, is that one of the ways to easily do that, on the surface easily, is to change the name. You change the name of your business, the synagogue, the church, whatever, or yourself. You change your name. And the name literally means one who wrestles, strives, argues, has a thing with God. All right? And what is profoundly important, or should be profoundly important to the reader or the listener to the story, is why is it so important to get a certainty of answer about a situation that by nature does not have a certainty of answer? What about the uncertainty of this scenario makes you uncomfortable because there's no definitive answer, and how that reflects how real life is? There are very few definitive answers in life. How is this going to pan out? How is this, if I do this, is there a definitive answer to that? No. We are not mathematical equations. We're human beings. And if the more in a way, a lot of the stories in scripture are lab training grounds that if we can live with that uncertainty, with that fluidity, with that nature of relationship that changes every day, the more we can get used to being able to dance that dance, the more comfortable we will be in our skin in everyday life. And that's the lesson of the Bible. Not
Yeah.
necessarily don't eat this, do eat that, but how can we live with the uncertainty that haunts our everyday?
Yeah. I love that you've shared a number of different pathways that we could go in sitting with that text, and I would encourage you to do what Tal is saying there, to read those scriptures and to sit with the text and to explore the different avenues
Be a
that
detective.
Tal has mentioned. Yeah,
Be a
absolutely. And I
detective.
mean,
Don't limit
you
it to the only what I said.
yeah,
I'm just
and you've said
making
to me
sure my
on many
kids don't say
occasions, the Bible is a book of questions more than it is a book of answers. And
that. Yeah.
after you've read the scriptures, you may have more questions than you started with, and that's
I
actually the
hope so.
purpose of it.
I hope
Yes.
so. But people are uncomfortable with that, and I'm sorry if they're not wrong for being uncomfortable, but that is the nature of life. That is a nature of life that is open ended, and you can be surprised and deeply gutted at the same time.
Yeah.
It's just it's not right. It's not wrong. It just is.
Tal, it's been wonderful as always. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. It's always been a pleasure, and thank you, community, for so much.
And we'll have Tal back with us again in the next term. So some comments here that I'll get to just very quickly before I finish up tonight. G'day to Nico. God bless you, mate. Thanks for joining us tonight. Lots of Carolyn saying, looking forward to the next 2 Sundays. Me too. Rihanna, thank you. I'm glad you're enjoying the conversation. It is very thought provoking. Carolyn and Carrie as well. Thank you all for joining me and Tal tonight. It'll just be me on my little lonesome next Tuesday night between 8 and 9. And don't forget Bayside Church online and in person from 10 o'clock this Sunday morning. Hope to have your company then. Hope the rest of your week goes really, really well. And I'll see you soon. Good night and God bless you.